Okay. Okay, I think the first thing I'm going to do before we start making any lights is just to do a little housekeeping. Call that background. Grab all this stuff. I'm just hitting Command G. Call it Geo. Over there. All right, so I'm going to go. Actually, before I even create a light, let's give all this stuff a material. Okay, so we're in the hypershade, which is where you can play with materials. Let's just do this. Create material standard surface. By default, it's set to hardware, but you can't really see what things are going to look like when they render, so you can change it to Arnold, which is really handy. You can try different objects, different lighting, or even add your own, which is really awesome. For now, all we want is to just have diffuse, just have the flat base part of the shader, no other component. And we also want it to be white. And this is kind of, I always start this way, and it lets me just kind of look at the lighting. It lets me ensure that the exposure is correct. It's just a good way to go. So standard surface, base 1, color white, turn off specular, and it's probably good to give it a name. We'll just call this matte white standard surface. All right. So now I'm going to click my background and my geo in the viewport. There's a million ways to do this, but this is the easiest. I'm going to, in the viewport there, assign existing material, matte white. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is create an area light. And I'm not going to just grab this thing and move it around all willy-nilly. I have very methodical about this. So I'm going to group it twice. I'm going to call, so we got parent, child, light. I'm going to call this one rotate X. I'm going to call this one rotate Y. And what this very simple thing, this very simple rig lets me do is control all the variables of light. Move this out in Z, rotate it up in X, rotate it over in Y. So now I can control exactly what the angle is, and by moving it my light only in Z, I can control the proximity to the geometry. Now, if we go over here for a second, turn my gate off so you can see. I want to be able to just move my light in Z relative to its parent, but right now the axes don't align to the light. And that is because at the moment our axes are set to world, so the world XYZ. Okay, so to change this orientation from world, which it is now, to local, which is the orientation relative to the object, you hold down whatever tool you're on, so W for translate and E and R, right? And with that held down, you click and you can change what you want this translation oriented to. So for us, we want object. And now what this lets us do is we can control the proximity that way. We can control this angle this way, and we can rotate it, our light around the subject that way. So before we go any further, though, let's just remind ourselves of what variables we are playing with. So we have direction. So just looking at that, what angle is the light pointing at the subject? We have relative size. How big is the light in relation to the hemisphere around the object? We have proximity, distance from the object, and we have exposure and intensity. So all of these things we talked about in depth in Design 3, and now they're coming back in action, because that's kind of the nice thing about light, is it is a universal thing. It doesn't matter if it's 3D or if we're doing it in reality. It's very similar. So the next thing we're going to do is create an Arnold standard surface shader. So this is a monolithic shader. So one shader that by altering the parameters you can create many, many different things. And we're going to go in depth in this in the future. For now, all we want is a nice matte white. And I'll show you why. So this button here opens the hypershade. So the hypershade is where we kind of organize and build our shaders. So we're going to go create material standard surface. By default, when you open this up, you might have it set to hardware. And this isn't very helpful. So if you shift it to Arnold, it'll let you kind of take a look at what your materials how your material is actually going to behave. With a model, and you can even change the lighting or add your own lighting. So that's really handy. So for us, all we want right now is to turn the specular to 0. All the other things, all the other parameters are 0 by default. And we want to set the color to white. And we do this because it lets us see how the light is behaving. It lets us figure out if it's properly exposed. And I always work this way. Another good habit to get into is to just start naming stuff. So I'm going to call this matte white standard surface. All right. So once again, there's many different ways to assign shaders to things, but in this instance, I think the easiest is just to click these two options, right-click, assign existing material, matte white. Okay, so now that we have our material assigned, let's take a look at the lighting. We can make a little more real estate by turning some things off. So I'm going to turn off the shelf. What's kind of handy is when you're coming to the window here, and if you want to kind of keep a window up while you're working, you can just click on it and it undocks it. So we're going to turn off just lots of stuff. All right. So what's also kind of handy is you can have Arnold live right as you're working. So I'm going to do that. Switch it to Arnold. All right, so now it's lighting the scene, but we can still select and manipulate things as we're working with the lighting. So right now it's really dark, and the reason for that is because it's there's not enough exposure. The light is too dim. So you can do either through intensity or exposure. I prefer exposure because it's logarithmic. Each time you add a unit, you're doubling the amount of light. So that means that the numbers stay kind of manageable, whereas in intensity they get really, really big. So it's just like a little bit easier to work with. And for now I'm just trying to get it so that the whites aren't clipped. All right, so if we review our lighting variables, we have the direction. So if we light it from the front, it's kind of flat. If we light it from the side, it's more volumetric. If we light it from the back, it's silhouetted, flat, but more about the contour around the scene. The size relative to the subject. So as I make this light bigger, the lighting gets softer, the shadows get softer. All right. And then finally, the proximity. So the further our light gets from our subject, the less extreme the fall off. So here, let me see if I can make this a little clearer. This to the side, and I'll put it on the deck. Right. And we'll, oh, here we go. Why is it sitting over there? All right. All right, so when it's close to the subject, it quickly goes, we'll make it really close, from light to dark. All right, it's black over there, it's white over here. The further we get, move it way over here, the less extreme the fall off becomes. And so, the best example of this, or a couple examples to think about, is in a birthday party, the candles lighting your face, it falls off to black really quickly, whereas the sun, you don't see any fall off at all when you look outside. But both the candle and the sun behave the same way, which is kind of amazing. Think about it. All right, so see, bright, bright, almost no gradation in the background there. So that's that. For backlighting to work, you need to be able to see the light source, and that requires a little more setup. So for now, we'll leave that till next time. All right. So maybe just like this. Let's just make this look a little nicer here. All right, so come in from a bit of an angle. I'm gonna make my light a little bigger. Bring it up in the X. It's a little too big. Yeah, it's Jagunda. As it's just like kind of like what I like to do. I like to have the light pretty much just off camera. I like the way the kind of gradation and fall off looks. All right, that is fine for now.